What's going on, guys? Evil Dragon here, back with another Dead by Daylight video. It is time for the 2025 Killer Tier List. This will be the 9.1.0 update, meaning the update that brings The Walking Dead, and so the changes to the pig, clown, knight, killers like that. So even though the footage that I do have was made before, I'm still taking those changes into account here. And the one final thing before we actually get started, as well as this is my opinion, someone who's played the game consistently for a couple of years now, over half its life, and so this is all based on my experience, and also as a console player, that might actually determine the ranking and tweak it slightly, just because console and PC play differently. So again, this is just my opinion. If you do agree, if you do disagree, feel free to talk about it in the comments below. I'll try and respond to everybody. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now, of course, the intro can't be very long because I can only make a 1 hour long video, so some of the killers, obviously there's 40 now, more than last year, they're going to be kind of rushed. Like our first one at the bottom of D tier, we go from D to S tier, the worst killer in Dead by Daylight is the Skull Merchant. Buggy, glitchy, and her power just got nerfed worse and worse. Of course, she's having a rework coming up, but currently with how she plays and how she is, I think it's safe to say she is the worst killer in the game. Next, the second worst killer in the game, right behind Skull Merchant, unfortunately, it's the Trapper. I mean, come on. His power is still super basic. Yes, they've done some buffs over the years, but you really just cannot compete, and it's unfortunate. You know, they really need to do a strong buff. Maybe make Trapper Sack base kit, who knows, but he is there at the second worst spot. Third, I'm honestly going to put, this is surprising to even myself, I'm going to put down the Hag. Now, a quick little Easter egg about this match here is when I was streaming it, my stream crashed, so nobody was able to see what actually happened, and we came back and won. But you don't care about that. You care about why I put the Hag as the third worst killer. But similar to Trapper and Skull Merchant, setup killers have to set something up, like a trap or a web for the Hag. The power creep has just really come for them. The fact that with the Trapper, you know, you can put your traps down, and then of course have someone dismantle some traps or whatever, it ruins your plan. Or with the Hag, if you trigger one trap in your web, it breaks the whole web of traps, as they're called. And so it just really disrupts the Hag. She's still very slow. She needs time to set up. Again, me 4.4 doesn't help her either. All this stuff means that I think the Hag is the third worst killer in the game. Moving on to the final killer I have in my D tier, and I think due to power creep as well, but also due to a buff to Michael, which is why Michael isn't in this tier, I'm giving it to Ghostface, and the fact that he still has amazing stealth, don't get me wrong, but again, he still has to individually mark each survivor and then go ahead and down them, and you know, if they're, yeah, 1 minute marked is a very long time, but Michael's power to down everybody is 1 minute for everybody, and it just got buffed recently. As well, that can be increased, whereas the timer for Ghostface can really only be increased by a couple seconds. I think it's 10 seconds at the most. And so that's one thing, but again, it's each individual survivor that's marked. Of course, you can be taken out of stealth by every single survivor. There's stuff like that that really just helps him. He doesn't have the far lunge. He doesn't have the far vault. So yeah, all this stuff I think just makes Ghostface slightly worse. I think he does need maybe a bit of a tweak or a rework, kind of like how Michael does. And that's where Michael comes in, Michael Myers, at the bottom of my C tier. Again, kind of the same stuff applies. Power creep just really hasn't helped him out. There's so many killers that does stuff better. When you charge up stuff, you get the Oni who can run around the map and down survivors right away with a long lunge as well. And is, of course, super fast. Or you have, again, people can play around that by just trying to hide and play around it well, stuff like that. So, or even his vaulting power that was a base mechanic, Chucky has that, or Xenomorph has that. So all this stuff applies. I think that puts Michael at the bottom of my C tier. And next we have the Wraith, another stealth killer that, again, can vault really fast like Michael. But again, due to killers like Xenomorph or Chucky or Wesker or the Ghoul, again, just power creep comes up and caught them. Again, all these other killers that have come out can vault faster and have potentially better stealth or whatever. So it just kind of injures them in the long run. And again, Wraith, for example, I know I put him as my worst killer in the game. Last year, I think upon further inspection, just me playing more, I think I was way wrong on him. That's why I'm putting him now in the C tier, not even my D tier. But again, doesn't mean he's still, again, you can play around Wraith really good. You still body block. You can play really well. It just doesn't mean he's at, I think, a really good power point. That's why he's still close to the bottom of my C tier. Next, we have the Trickster. Now, Trickster probably is the worst range killer in the game. For all we know, that could go to the Skull Merchant with a rework. But again, you have to hit people 8 times. Yes, you're a lot faster now. Yes, you get main event faster now. But if you're able to play around Trickster, around even the basic of loops, and you know how to crouch in time, or even zigzag between the knives, as the knives are really weird, where the Hunter's Hatchet, or the Springtrap's Hatchet, or the Slinger Gun is just straightforward. His knives, being such a small hitbox, you can literally just go in between and kind of zigzag around them. I've discovered that recently, and I was kind of shocked that you can do that against the Trickster when I played against one. But he just had a problem downing me. Maybe affected this year. But again, I just think as a ranged killer, he is relatively weak. Again, all these other killers that are ranged attack for the most part can down you or make you lose a health state instantly. He's the only one who cannot and has to hit you multiple times. For that reason, he's here. Next, I have the Dredge. The Dredge really comes down to locker RNG. Certain maps might be very good for the Dredge, like Midwich. Lockers everywhere, lockers in every single classroom, outside, all this stuff, very solid. But then you have like a Cold Wind Farm map that doesn't have lockers in the middle, say Rotten Fields. There's literally nothing you can do, can't teleport out there, nothing that hinders you. Plus, one big thing that knocks against the Dredge now is the gamma setting. If you turn that gamma setting all the way up, that just straight up combats the Dredge's, darkness effect, Night Shroud. And so you could just straight up see the Dredge even though the Night Shroud's active, and that really hinders them. Just one basic game setting that was a good thing overall, don't get me wrong, but that just absolutely hinders the Dredge's ability to be kind of stealthy in that regard. Next up, we have the Pig, and the Pig, whew, not one of the worst killers anymore. Good buffs, being able to ambush faster, crouch speed is a lot different, so it's not as slow. She's now the same speed as survivors when she's crouched, which I believe is the same as Ghostface. I might be wrong about that, but again, the fact that she is faster is amazing. Thing is, nothing happened to her traps. I still think her traps take too long. That's my opinion. Maybe, again, the thing is, you can't make traps super short, and I know that. They're over 2 minutes. But sometimes Dead by Daylight games last only around 8 to 10 minutes. And so the fact that for a quarter to a fifth of a game, that's a trap speed, I feel like that can be too long. But again, you can't make it a minute. You can't even make it a minute 30 because then that might be too short, especially if the Pig plays around that. And if you don't get all your boxes, so there's that weird room in there. It just doesn't work very well. But I do like the buff they gave to the Pig, which is why I'm putting the Pig here. And right here, the second best killer I have in my C tier, not best killer in the game, but in my C tier, we have the Legion. Legion, again, has been power crept by killers like the Ghoul, being able to just get such an easy first hit. Obviously not as much as the Legion, but again, you give him Deep Wound with your ability, and then you have your 3 abilities, and you jump around the map extremely fast. That mobility that the Legion had over, I mean, barely mobility, but the mobility he did have over the Ghoul is gone. Or the Plague, being able to make every survivor broken compared to just Deep Wound, and it's a mending simulator. You can just out-heal it or even run around. You can stun the Legion to get him out of his power. All this stuff makes for the Legion being slightly worse. Again, obviously some buffs had come last year, and those were nice. But again, due to power creep for a lot of these killers in my D, C, and even low B tier is unfortunate, but that's just how the game's going to go on. They have to come up with new ideas, and even just taking some basic killer ideas and making them better. That's what they're going to have to do. That's what they're going to have to do. And that sucks for older killers like the Legion. And now at my top of my C tier, potentially still one of the most balanced killers in the game. Maybe this is where, again, my B tier is my bell curve. That main area where a lot of my killers are going to be. And maybe this is the start of it. We have the Demogorgon. Very solid killer. Can break pallets slightly faster when you shred them. Has a longer range lunge attack. And can teleport to, 7 different things. However, Onryo, 7 TVs right by generators. Obviously, you could pick where your portals want to go, but you're usually going to want them in that middle game to be by generators and then probably by a gate at the end of the game. But again, you have to set that up, and that kind of hinders that there. Or Freddy can teleport again to all the generators and people healing. Blight has 2 lawn jumps. The Castlevania Dracula's Wolf, 2 lawn jumps compared to, 1 really long jump that the Demogorgon has. So again, just that power creep there. But Demogorgon, again, very balanced killer, seems to still play very well, and that comes at the top of my C tier. Moving on to B tier, we have Chucky. And this might be the biggest shock, and if you disagree, again, feel free to take it down in the comments and we'll debate it here. But I think with Chucky, the biggest problem I think people still have is not even his power. It's the fact how small he is. It's still very hard to see Chucky before he's even on you. And then once he is on you, if there's tall grass or there's an object in the way, if you're not really paying attention to the shoes, it's very easy for the Chucky player to play around you as a survivor. But I think the thing with Chucky is it determines on how you play. Obviously, when you use his slice and dice, it plays or acts like a Billy Chainsaw or an Oni Demon Dash, so again, it has that large radius of like a turn circle, so if you're on the inside, it can be easy to dodge. But if you're playing as the killer, it can definitely be very easy to play with. Again, if you scamper constantly and if you have a really good mouse flick, it's very hard on console. I have done it on console before, but again, you don't have that same mouse flick with a stick that you do with a mouse. So again, there are some Chucky players who can get infinite, slice and dices by just vaulting back and forth to mind game and then finally going for a hit. Kind of like with a Bubba's chainsaw, how you go for a pallet, switch around, switch back, switch around, or a pig dash. You can do that with the slice and dice. But I find it a lot harder, at least on console, than on PC, because again, you have a stick compared to a mouse for flicking all over But again, regardless, I think the biggest thing with Chucky, again, you can outplay him. He's a fun killer to play. You can definitely play with his ability. You can use your size to your advantage. You can do certain things like speed to make yourself a lot faster. It's a lot harder to tell because of how small you are. Again, I think that's just the big thing that why people might put Chucky a lot higher than I am. Because again, playing his power, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot very easy to play, but survivors can play around you very easily as well if they know what they're doing. I just think the biggest thing is Chucky's size. That is the biggest factor he has to his strength. But again, his power, nothing too like overpowered, which is why I wouldn't put him a lot higher. But he is in my B tier. And next we have the Nemesis, a very solid all-around killer. If you want range, Nemesis can do range, not super far, but can do range. If you want to slow down to do the infection, you could do that having to make survivors go get vaccines, and there's not too many. So again, if they use too many, or you have an add-on to even shorten that number, very quickly they'll all just be infected, so you can just hear them all around the map. You have 2 random zombies that, again, really, yes, it's part of your power, but it's truly RNG based. You never know if you're going to get a hit, a body block from them. They might trap a survivor to an area when you're chasing them, or they might be on the other side of the map doing absolutely nothing, getting stuck on everything. It's completely up in the air what they do, so it's really just your tentacle that's your power. And again, being able to break pallets, and then again, slightly extra range, whatever. But it's not too bad. He's definitely a good all-around killer, kind of similar to Demogorgon a little bit further back. Longer range attack, has, that pallet break that's slightly faster and better. And again, the zombies, they can come in clutch. That's why I put Nemesis higher than both Demogorgon and, of course, Chucky, because he did get some recent buffs. Not recent, a couple months, even a year ago, but especially to his add-ons like the Liquor Ton. All this stuff definitely made him a lot better, I think, and that's why I'm putting him here. Next, we have Bubba, which again, very similar to both Nemesis and Demogorgon. You want to break pallets faster, you can do that. It's a chainsaw killer, and so he, of course, can insta-down people, which, of course, Demogorgon and Bubba can't do, but he's got that range, again, if you know how to use your chainsaw properly, using it up, having certain add-ons that allow you to just go a lot farther than people would think. Yes, he's good for loops, and again, kind of mentioned earlier with the pig, how you can fake a pallet, go right to the pallet, turn around, go to the pallet, and try and play around a loop like that. But again, he's got that range to him that, again, if you have the right add-ons and you know what you're doing, you could hit someone from, say, if they're at Shack and you're on, let's say, the map like Ormond, and they try to go all the way to the main building, and you just leave Shack using your chainsaw, you can definitely catch up to them before they even get to another loop. He's got some good range to him there. Next, I have the Unknown. I think a better range killer than Nemesis, of course, but still has that infected thing, Go ahead, hit someone from far away, they get infected, hit them again, they lose that, and take a health state. Of course, they can get rid of the UVX or the infection, whatever, a lot easier than you can with Nemesis. You just got to look at the killer, and he can be played around relatively more easily, I would say. Whereas with the Nemesis, you got to have a straight line, you can drag your shot and hit people with that. With this, the UVX grenade launcher thing, it bounces all over the place, but you can definitely get hits through walls, even through floors, if you can see the collision. And know where someone is, maybe through the floor with like an aura reading perk or something. And of course, what he has over both Nemesis is he can teleport, similar to, of course, Demogorgon. Not as often as a Demogorgon, but he can teleport, and you can strategically place your teleporting things. I would have placed him a lot higher. I think I did last year, but now that he's been out for a bit, people know how to play around him. He hasn't been changed too much. That's why I'm putting him here in the B tier. Next, we have Death Slayer. Here's going to be a lot of my range killers. So Death Slayer, again, a very nice killer. Pretty good range, very solid range. And when you hit someone, deep wound happens. However, I recently made a video about MFT being really good, and this is the one killer, or one of the killers, that's countered very hard by MFT. Again, not looking at that at all. Again, good range, certain add-ons that can make you even insta-down, or you can reload faster, or whatever. You can play around a lot of loops. The Death Slayer's hitbox is very small compared to like the UVX or the Springtrap and Huntress Hatchets and Fire Axe. It is a very small hitbox, very similar to the knife. I think it's even smaller though. So you can hit shots that you might not be able to hit with a Huntress Hatchet, but just hit right through a little tiny hole in some sort of junk pile or some crud on like Asimov's resting place or whatever, and that way you can just either, break the chain and they get injured from that, or pull them towards you, get a hit, and then maybe you get something like Sloppy Butcher or Rapid Brutality off or something. So again, very solid killer. Next, I have the Xenomorph. Again, can fast travel, not as fast as, with an instant teleport. The Demogorgon's pretty fast teleport, but teleporting around that then gives you, a smaller terror radius. You then go ahead and get your long range attack. You have your faster vault. Yeah, Xenomorph just recently got nerfed, but Xenomorph, again, is, I think, easier to play around with his range attack compared to someone like Death Slayer or the Nemesis. Again, it doesn't have as much range as Deathslinger, and of course the Deathslinger's hitbox, while generous, it's also a lot smaller, so again, you get those cheeky hits, which you won't be able to get with Xenomorph. And again, Xenomorph is a lot more straight on, so again, if you're maybe crouched behind something, you might not get a hit, whereas with the Nemesis, due to the hitbox and how it works like a Kit Kat bar, if you've ever heard that before, you might get a hit with Nemesis, but you wouldn't be able to get with Xenomorph. But I think that really sets apart is, again, that better stealth, the better vault, and again, the fact that he can just move around the map a lot quicker there. Moving on, we have the Clown, and while I did originally have him placed a lot lower, with the update playing him versus him, wow, is he a lot better. This still might not be high enough. Maybe he deserves to be high B tier, even low A tier, because with his speed, yeah, the slowness got worse, whatever. But due to, of course, him being a lot faster, of course, and then putting the slowness anyways, he's now faster overall if you apply the hinder status effect plus your haste. He's faster than he was even before. Plus add-ons, perks, all this stuff. It's made him a lot crazier, so he goes in the spot right here. Next I have, here's where these next two killers, it might be very controversial, and people might not agree with me, and that's fine, but I have the Huntress. Huntress is, we're into the middle, almost top of my B tier here. And Huntress is still a very solid killer. What is it, 7 or 8 hatchets that you get to have. You can tell I don't play Huntress too much, so maybe that's why I'm rating her a lot lower. But again, very nice terror radius that is slightly bigger due to the lullaby, and then of course you actually have the terror radius itself. And then again, Huntress hatchets, you don't have to reload too often. When you hit someone, they take a damage health state. You can literally throw this anywhere around the map if you know how to do those orbitals and stuff, and if you have a whole range build, there are definitely people who can hit some crazy shots. But again, her hitbox with the Huntress hatchet is not as nice as Deathslinger with through little holes and stuff, so there's definitely places where survivors might be a lot more safe than they would be against a different survivor, stuff like that. But again, she's a very nice killer, but this is where it's controversial. Next, I'm putting Springtrap. Springtrap, I would have put maybe A tier, but of course, now that I've played him a lot more, he's actually one of my most played killers. He's now my highest prestige. Again, this is maybe bias. I would say he's better than Huntress for the fact that he constantly gets his hatchet constantly over and over again from 10 to 8 seconds, depending on your add-ons. Yes, it's only one, but again, the exact same thing that it does as a Huntress hatchet. Not as good of range, but you hit someone, they take a damage state. Plus, if they don't remove the axe, you have wall hacks and you can grab them, which is nice. Or also, when the axe is in their back, they're oblivious, they have the broken status effects, so all this other stuff compared to a Huntress hatchet. Because again, no add-ons you need add-ons with the Huntress hatchet, so it's very nice there. He can fast travel and he gets amazing stealth from that, and there's always that risky chance. It's honestly never going to happen, like ever. It's only happened to me like 7 or 8 times according to the achievement that I got the progress in. But you can always, for whatever reason, end up getting an insta-grab on someone if you go into the fast travel doors. As well, technically, yeah, the doors with the cameras are definitely a knock against you. But again, it's very simple to play around. Just get out of their range or even throw your axe at it, so it just breaks the camera and they can't do anything about that. Again, 20 seconds of stealth is something that Huntress doesn't have base kit, so it's super nice that the Huntress can use. And again, just like that, say you have to reload. Again, I mentioned that Springtrap doesn't have to do that. Huntress, you got to go out of your way to your locker. Yeah, you have a perk, but what if you don't have perks? Then it's just kind of annoying. You got to go out of your way again to go ahead and just grab a locker. Whereas again, Springtrap doesn't have to do that. All this other stuff, all these little things. Again, one throwable that you don't have to reload, it comes back relatively quick. To several throwables, but you do have to go out of your way to reload, right? Stealth, no stealth. Wall hacks, when you have the hatchet hit something, someone runs through that, they get killer instinct, so you get that, and the Huntress doesn't. All these little things add up that I think that Springtrap is slightly better than Huntress. Maybe you can switch these two around, sure, but the whole thing about Springtrap is he's a jack of all trades, master of none, and that's because he's supposed to be played in a whole bunch of different ways, right? The one final thing I didn't even mention is when you get rid of your throwable, he becomes faster, 4.6 meter per second, the standard speed killer, whereas with Huntress, she's always super slow. Or not super slow, but of course she's faster than Survivors, but still slower compared to Springtrap. So again, she doesn't have all that master of everything that Springtrap does. Yeah, definitely maybe better at range, but again, I just don't think that edges out on all the other stuff that Springtrap has. And next, after Springtrap, we have the Doctor. Doctor's always that one killer I find super solid. At least when I play him, I'm always doing good. I'm always getting some solid stuff. I like that they've always kept him relatively consistent. Again, that's just maybe how I play. But with the recent changes, again, you get your blast, your static blast a lot more, allowing people to get madness a lot more. His static pulse thing that you just send out to block people from doing vaults and whatever that's called. It's always a lot of fun. It's always very consistent. Being able to stop people from pallets and whatnot. You don't even need, yes, there's tons of perks that you can use, but you don't even need them if you can play Doctor correctly, and a lot of people can. And that's why, again, maybe his add-ons you definitely need a PhD to understand with all the, especially the iridescent ones, with all the stuff they cram in and explain. But honestly, he's a lot simple, I think, than a lot other people make him out. He's a very simple killer to play and very nice and easy and fun. And some survivors, again, if you know what you're doing, they'll have to struggle planning around him, but even good survivors, they will. Next, I have Freddy, and he's the second highest in my B tier. I think Freddy, maybe this is enough credit, because again, he got his rework, and it was a really solid rework, and he has now kind of a ranged attack with the pallets. I mean, if someone runs over to a pallet, you can definitely go ahead and blow that up, and it's really good. But regardless, he also has the dream snares that aren't just sitting there. You have always one that you can send out and hit someone, and of course, if they're not in the dream state, it just makes them go into the dream world faster so that you get your teleport faster, of course, which isn't changed at all. But if they aren't, you just send it out, hit them, they're super slow, and it's very hard for them to not take a hit there or even not get grabbed, because of course, if they try to do a vault, it's a slow vault, so you just grab them. Also, with the teleporting, they added in, of course, that you could teleport to someone healing in the dream world whenever in a certain radius or whatnot. That's always very solid. And just overall with his rework, I think they added everything in to make him a much better, stronger package. Again, from Dream Palace, not combined with Dream Snares to have it all together. Or again, being able to teleport not just to generators, but also to healing. All the stuff, the add-on change, all that stuff adds up to him being a very solid killer. From being where he was last year, where I played him last year, he's one of my worst killers. But moving to the top, the highest killer I have in my B tier is the Onryo. The Onryo, maybe this is again a very wrong one. I don't know. But if you know what you're doing as a survivor, you can play around her tapes really well. Just make sure you're managing that, or again, making sure you're never going down and chase, that you can maybe make the Onryo lose, chase, and so they'll leave you alone, and that way you can get to a VHS tape or whatever, or you just last long enough in chase that eventually, gens get done, the game's over, and you don't get that permanent stacks if you do get hooked. But again, as long as you're managing your tapes. But on the flip side, with the killer, again, doing teleporting all the way around the map, going to different things, especially when a certain survivor might be you're in chase, and they're just going around the whole map because you're just teleporting, giving them that ability to go around the map. But the reason why is, again, you're just taking that teleporting all over. It makes it a lot better for you to build up condemn stacks. And again, it's just a solid killer overall that has good stealth as well. One of the best strats you can still do, and so many people fall for, is the stealth. And what I mean by that is activating the stealth. If someone drops a pallet right in front of you and you fake breaking the pallet by going ahead and demanifesting, it looks exactly the same, or at least almost exactly the same. Not that people fall for it, mimicking that you're breaking a pallet. So all this stuff to say, the fact that you can still build up condemned, again, as long as you know what you're doing as the killer, and as long as the survivors don't know what they're doing as a survivor with their tapes, not managing it very well, not managing their time very well, means that you can still get the kills off relatively quickly. And then again, with her teleporting as well, just helping you move around the map quickly, all this stuff, the stealth in general, she's a very solid killer. Moving on to my A tier, this is where I'll definitely be explaining some of my choices for where I put the killers here a little bit more. Starting off at the bottom of my A tier, we have the Sunbite, and I think the Sunbite is a very solid range killer that doesn't use range for damage mainly, unless you have the one specific Engineer's Fan add-on, but uses it for a very good slowdown and chase. Want to have people stay stunned and hindered so that they vault pallets or windows slower? Use your Possess Chain or a Chain Hunt active. Want to be able to find survivors because you can't find them, but of course your Chain Hunt is slowly building? Then they use the box and you teleport right over to one random survivor, and there you go, you're in a chase, you found someone. Want to be able to find all survivors if you just happen to know where the cube spawns right at the start of the match, as long as you use Lethal Pursuer and know exactly where it'll spawn from, just playing the game. And that's the thing you can do with Pinhead. I don't quite know how it works, but as this thing you can do, the box spawns as far away as it is from survivors, so if you use Lethal Pursuer, you can find the box, whatever. But again, if you want to find where all the survivors are, and you just either find the box right away at the start, or just happen to come across it, you can do that starting the Chain Hunt, but also just showing you where all the survivors are, which is very good. Again, Pinhead is just a very solid all-around killer, especially in chase with the Possess Chains or Chain Hunt going on. Both of them together is very good, or just a Possess Chain, again, hitting someone makes it super hard for them to do anything, either make it to a pallet, very quickly make it to a vault, or again, vaulting a pallet or a window. It doesn't even matter. It's just done for them. Next, we have the Plague, and the Plague is really just like a better Legion overall. You want range, Plague can do range. You want everyone to be injured, or in this case, not even just injured with a deep wound so that, they can heal it back up or whatever. You want them to be permanently injured for the rest of the game through broken status. You can do that. You want them to be very loud and annoying, kind of like with Nemesis's infection. You can do that. The only thing that Plague doesn't have going for it that, say, Legion does, And of course, that map traversability, if you use the Legion's, Fatal Frenzy for map traversability. But again, it doesn't really matter. Being able to just go ahead and keep everyone injured for the rest of the game and having your build wrap around that can work very well. Not a lot of other killers can do that, maybe the Ghoul. But besides that, this is just one of the best killers that, again, it just makes it very tough for survivors. Of course, there's a lot of perks that survivors can use, like Resilience or Iron Will, or all these other perks while injured is very good for them. But at the same time, they're not always going to be running that. And so if you just happen to come across, say, someone who's always using Dramaturgy and Finesse, and then all of a sudden they're injured for the rest of the game, that's just half their build just gone. The fact that the play can do that and absolutely ruin some people is very, very strong for her. And again, just talking about if they heal at the wrong time, that can spiral a game down in your favor very, very quickly by just giving yourself the corrupt purge so that you have again that long range attack, especially when you can hit multiple survivors with this. So if someone's going for an unhook and you just happen to hit them and then you hit the person on unhook, so now someone's either down if they were already injured, of course, being sick, and if someone has this deep wound from the endurance stats effect, you can just chase them and hit them from a distance, and they're two per down very quick. That's just a scenario where that's very strong. That's why I'm putting Plague down here. Next, I have the Artist, who I would say currently is the second best range killer in the game after buffs to a certain other killer. And I mean range killers specifically when their ability focuses mainly on range. Vecna and Dracula, of course, have a range attack, but are they a range killer? I wouldn't say so, as they're more like, everything's included in their kit. But again, a killer like the Huntress or a killer like the Deathslayer, they're definitely a range killer. But the Artist, I would say, is the second best range killer, being able to hit multiple people at once, or even watch multiple gens, watch multiple hexes, which is why I would say that kind of like with a trap killer like Singularity or Trapper, Artist is one of the best killers in the game for a hex build, being able to watch your hexes from across the map by just sending a bird that way. In Chase, you can just stop loops very, very well by just putting a bird in front of a vault, in front of a pallet, in front of anything, and it just stops them from being able to play around that. So they either have to leave, or they have to take an M1 hit, or they have to take a bird hit, or if it's through a wall, they have to take a hit from the bird, and then again, you have your bird, and you can do the shotgun effect and hit them. It doesn't matter whether they're in loops, whether they're halfway across the map. The Artist can do many, many things and just hit people wherever she wants with their birds, and that's why I'm putting her here. Next, after the Artist, I have Wesker, and maybe Wesker should be a bit higher, but as someone on console who doesn't play Wesker a lot, and this is the big reason why I'll go on a little tangent here, why for tier lists I don't have the A plus, A minus, for example, that all other people put. And the reason why is maybe for Wesker, people might put Wesker if you know how to slide tech or with the slide tech up in the A plus tier. Whereas for me, I don't know how to slide tech at all. But what that means, maybe would I put him in the A minus tier? No, I just put him in the A tier. I put everybody in the A tier, but some higher than others, just because, again, I don't like the fact that there are certain things that other killers might do, and that gives them a slight edge over kind of thing. Like, again, with the Plague, if you're playing only a sickness build with maybe a meme add-on, and that way, she wouldn't be as good. She'd be in the A minus tier. But, if you're focused heavily on Corrupt Purge or forcing survivors to give you Corrupt Purge, whatever, A plus tier, you know what I mean? It doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why, again, for Wesker, or again, all the other killers in my A tier, my S tier, my B tier, there's no B plus or B minus. It's just one solid tier with some being higher than others in that tier. That makes sense. Anyways, going back to Wesker here. Wesker is a solid killer, good map traversability, being able to infect people, and they have to clean that up that you can see them then, and if they don't, you can be able to just insta-grab them, or again, being able to just throw them around the map can stop them from maybe getting to a exit gate, or can maybe stop them from getting to a hatch. If they're already close, you can just zoom over, grab them over the hatch, throw them away. Stuff like that can work very well in the end game. Again, the infection is very nice, being able to slow them down so that in chase, if you don't end up using your power, and you get an M1 hit very easily, or even a grab very easily through them trying to vault or something like that. All in all, he's a very solid killer. Again, that slide tech boosts him up, of course, stuff like that, or other individual techs that you can do. But I just think he's a very solid killer. Not too crazy, especially when it comes to the next killer, Twins. Obviously, Twins now got a very small quality of life change, but I still think that buffs her up quite a bit over here into the A tier. Maybe I didn't give her enough credit, but considering I play the Twins a lot more, being able to do all sorts of things, from body blocking pallets and windows with Charlotte while you're chasing someone as Victor, to being able to use Victor as, of course, kind of like that radar. You just set Victor somewhere randomly, and anyone who runs in, you know where they are, so you can come after them as Charlotte. Being able to switch also back and forth very quickly to Charlotte due to the add-on changes was very nice and very clean. One of the biggest things you can still do, especially now that, it didn't matter that Insidious got buffed anyways, it was only a 1 second buff, but one of the best things you can still do is somewhat kind of camp as Charlotte by sending Victor somewhere else, then going over to Charlotte and just sitting in front of a hook from a far away distance. Most people might think you're on Victor when in reality you're there, and of course, Victor himself, such a long range jump that he can do stopping people from getting through the exit gate, going ahead and just making people broken, having that radar where, again, if someone uses Victor and decides to not break him because, oh, we're keeping Victor for ourselves, we're not going to allow the killer to get Victor back. But in reality, it's just, showing that UAV killer instinct to all the other survivors in the radius. So, you can keep Victor and you run for someone else. It doesn't matter. That's one of the best things that you can do with the twins is just go for many other people. So then next we have the knight. And knight is very, very similar to the twins, but I would say slightly better. And the thing that was with the twins, you have someone, as Victor, you hit someone, so now Victor's lash onto them, and then you chase either that person with Charlotte or someone else as Charlotte, right? In this case, you just summon another knight companion to just straight up go ahead and chase someone else or chase the same person that you are chasing. Or if you want to break something fast, use the Carnifex. Have someone, again, better in chase, use the Assassin, or have someone longer in chase, just stalled, so they can't do gens, can't heal, can't go for an unhook or anything, use the Jailer. Right? That's really all the thing is. Or again, trying to, with the Victor, how you set him up somewhere so that you can see where people are, you kind of just set where if they're working on a gen, the whole survivor group is just working on a gen in one particular area, or maybe someone's on hook, you just send the Jailer specifically there as, he lasts longest in the longest radius there, I believe. Also the Carnifex also just got buffed to last longer, but regardless, you just send them to that area to just watch. So now, if they want to go ahead and do that gen, with Victor, he would see where they are, so you switch back to Victor, or you just walk over there to Charlotte. With the Knight, you don't have to do that at all. You don't have to make your way over there. You don't have to switch over there at all. The AI, the Knight, will just walk in its path, back and forth, guarding a gen, guarding a hook, maybe cutting people off from where they are healing, so they're kind of stuck in that area. They're just stopped there. They can't do anything. Or again, like with the Knight, you just set someone to be chased by the Assassin, and then you pincer maneuver. You force the Knight to get a hit first, so then they get that speed boost, but because you're already there, you can lunge and get a hit. All this stuff means that the Knight can do a lot of things that the twins can do, but even more and better so. But not as well as other killers, I would say. Like, the injured stuff that certain other killers can do, like the Ghoul. Kind of, again, injures can be very risky. And again, with the small nerf to the Knight especially with the Jailer, the flag that gets planted down having starting early, so you can go stop the hunt early, and then you get the endurance and all this stuff. All this stuff adds up to, I think the Knight is still very, very good, especially in chase, and for that reason, that's why he earned the spot here. Next, we have Oni. And Oni is very similar to two killers in particular, Michael Myers and Billy. Now, Michael Myers, for the reason as it takes very long for him to set up, and when he does set up and finally gets to his final tier, he can insta-down, he has a long lunge, and he can vault faster. Right? But it needs a very long setup. Whereas with Oni, you have to hit one person, drag out the chase slightly longer so that maybe you can get enough blood. That way you can actually get Blood Fury out of your first chase. Maybe you lose a gen in that first chase or whatever, but it's fine. And when you do get Blood Fury and you set up to that final stage with Blood Fury, you are extremely fast, do have technically a longer lunge when you hold the R2 when you're not in Demon Fury. And you can insta-down people, right? So that's a lot better than Michael, because Michael doesn't have that much traversability, that speed, that nice turn rate, all that stuff, right? Obviously, he doesn't have the vault that Michael does, but still. But then look at Billy, where Billy always has his chainsaw at the ready, so he can always zoom around the map extremely fast. Not overdrive speed, but he can still do that. It's still the same, rough turn rate and turn circle that the Oni has. And for that reason that he doesn't have that setup, that's why Billy's slightly higher here. We haven't talked about Billy yet. But for Oni specifically, I think the biggest thing that knocks him down, not being slightly higher than up to where Billy is, or the killer I have right after Oni here, is the big fact that if the survivors know what they're doing, they can play around Oni and not give him his power. How do you play around that? Well, first off, you don't run no mither, all right? That's the biggest thing, right? Or any of the invocations. But the biggest thing is you drop pallets. As long as you can play around pallets very round, well, make it to Shack, where Shack has the vault, so you don't have to really play around the pallet right away. You just need to get those 3 vaults. Maybe you can make it somewhere else. But as long as you can play around some pallets to make it to a safe vaulting location, or again, just from pallet to pallet, dragging it out as your teammates do gens, and as long as you don't take a single hit, the Oni will not get his power, leaving him just powerless for the entire map as long as he doesn't get a hit. That's the biggest thing against Oni. Whereas again, compared to Billy, Billy always has a chainsaw at the ready. He can always has his power, which is very similar to Billy. Very similar to Oni. So for that reason, that's why I'm giving this spot to Oni here. Very good killer, very good at moving around the map very quickly, very good at downing people, very good at, slugging, which is one of his biggest things. But again, as long as survivors know what they're doing and don't give him that first hit, it can turn his mid to late game to be very bad for him. But if you get a good early hit, it just spirals from there, and it can definitely lead into your favor. Next, we have Singularity. And Singularity is one of the best endgame killers, maybe the best endgame killer, but also a really good killer mid-game. being able to set up your cameras all around on every single gen, and then once the gens pop, you set them up on different angles looking at the exit gate. Of course, when you can watch people get the overclock mode, being very good in chase, as long as people are infected. Yes, the EMPs are still kind of irksome, especially if you place your cameras in the wrong location, so they can get one or two cameras pop right away, plus removing the little bobble at the back of them, that little infection there. But with Singularity, I think he's just a very solid killer. Being able to watch the entire map and technically being able to teleport around the entire map. If you do get the camera off and then you switch, of course, to the overclock duration. Chases are very, very rough with him. I mean, being able to vault extremely fast, being able to break everything from pallets or walls very fast, being able to not get stunned and then even hit through a stun just makes it very risky in chase. But as long as again, survivors play it right, making sure they time their EMPs right. So if they're in a chase nearby and they do have that little singularity infection thing, they break both the camera and get rid of that effect on themselves, or again, they just don't get infected at all. All this stuff can make it very rough for Singularity, as that's kind of how he works. You got to make sure you get that infection off. But still, it's relatively easy for Singularity, I would say, and for that reason, I'm putting him here. Next, you have Billy. Again, Billy is very similar to Oni, so we won't go over it very fast. But again, you have your chainsaw right away, your power right away. Not the overdrive, of course, but you can move around the map extremely fast. And when you get overdrive, even faster. Turn rate's a little bit rough, but as long as you know what you're doing and you can curve your chainsaw around most loops, you'll be able to get insta-downs just fine, being able to insta-down people. Some of the best map traversability in the game. Again, just very similar to Oni. Once you kind of get one hit down, you can even end up slugging. If you get someone to the basement, it's a game over for whoever maybe got the unhook, or for that person who is off the hook, because again, the 10 seconds isn't super long, they can just kind of wait it out. So all that to be said, Billy, very similar to Oni, but just better so. Next, we have, in my opinion, the greatest long-range killer in the game, and that's Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head just got buffed, and it has been too long. I mean, all of his add-ons just got absolutely changed to be a lot better. His base range got to be a lot better. His duration for his trails got to be a lot better. Obviously, when he drags his sword to do a ranged attack, it's slightly worse, but who cares? That doesn't even amount to the buffs that he got for his range and just his attacks in general. Yeah, they also just nerfed his cages, which is unfortunate. But you still can't use perks such as Deliverance or, of course, Wicked or anything. But it hasn't been mentioned that stuff like Borrow Time or Babysitter will be worked on Cage. Of course, the only thing they now get is that base kit unhook effect, that survivors get when they're unhooked, whether themselves or by somebody else. They just get that. But most perks still will not work or activate, like, DS, for example. So that's still a big thing for them. And of course, you can just execute people if you don't want to go ahead and cage them. Survivors, then you can just go ahead and execute them once they get down to that final hook stage and you down them for a very quick finish there. But again, with all these buffs that he just got with the range and stuff, as long as you can play Pyramid Head very well, can predict your moves, hits through walls and all that stuff, he is still very good and, in my opinion, the best range killer in the game. Next, after Pyramid Head, we have Spirit, and this is my second highest killer in my A tier. I think Spirit would have been my highest in A tier, not quite in my top 5 or my S tier, because of the fog vial that just got added. That fog vial really counters Spirit, unfortunately, hiding things like scratch marks, pools of blood, all grunts and noises, footsteps, all of that. It just is a very knock against her. But, she was really good for the super long, but then other killers, say Dracula, got her entire ability in their base kit and whatnot, so that knocks it for a bit. But again, she's very similar to another killer, Wraith. She goes invisible. Right, for a small time, Wraith goes invisible, they both make noises, but whereas Wraith has to take time to come out of the cloak, right, and then get a speed boost for a hit, Spirit comes out immediately, of course. Yes, she can't see survivors, and she can't body block, but, as long as you pay attention, even if you need a little bit of help, you can use Strider, that perk, but regardless, she just comes out instantly. As long as you're following someone, you can get a hit off. If you're mind gaming around a pallet or a window, of course, with how loud your sound is, you can get a cheeky hit there. It doesn't matter. She's just a very solid killer here, and she comes in at the second spot in my A tier. And I think the highest killer I have in my A tier, my top 6, my 6th killer, is the Houndmaster, just missing the S tier. I think the Houndmaster, with all her bugs, is still very solid. And if they removed all of her bugs, or at least fixed so much stuff, because she still has so much stuff wrong with her kit there, I think she would be so much better. Being able to use the dog and just... Here's the biggest thing. She is probably the best killer in the game at dealing with survivor with friends. There, I said it. A zombie can maybe hold someone back for a few seconds before they get stunned or flashlight stunned or whatever. Blight and Nurse, of course, are amazing, but they can't go after 2 people at once. The Knight, while can go against 2 people at once, of course, there's all these other survivors. The dog and the Houndmaster are some of the best people, again, in my opinion, the best killer in the game at being able to hold off Survivor with friends. For example, if you want to run an Obsession build, or you want to run an Obsession build where instead of killing them right away, you let them live for super long, right? Say you want save the best for last stacks, right? You don't want to go with the Obsession. You throw the dog at the Obsession. Maybe they're friends with the person you're going after, or maybe again it's a Survivor with Friends scenario. So they see you have save the best for last. They try to take protection hits. You throw the dog at them. They cannot do anything. Yes, you can help them. A survivor can help their friend get the dog off, but by that point it's too late, and the person you're chasing that's not the Obsession, maybe they're injured or dead on hook or whatever, they go down. Or for whatever reason, maybe you're losing, and so now to win the game, to make sure you get that win, you have to tunnel. And that survivor you were tunneling, everyone comes to take hits, so the closest one you just send the dog to, the dog gets lashed on, they can't do anything, so you go for that injured person. That's one more person off the way, out of the way, right? Same with an unhook. You're camping in the end game because you're losing. Maybe you want to get this final unhook. You've already killed one person, maybe, for example, or maybe they're all alive, whatever. Someone comes, you throw the dog at someone else, so they come. You then are able to hit somebody else, and by the time that final fourth survivor comes in, you hit them, and they ends up being a trade for you. So yes, they get the hook off, but they're down. The dog, is finally let go, whatever. All these different scenarios to be said, Houndmaster is the best, in my opinion, at dealing with Survivor with friends for a whole bunch of different scenarios because you can just hold someone completely hostage. They can't do anything while you go for the person you're desired to get down. That being said, in chase, the Houndmaster is also amazing. Being able to send the dog, yeah, small nerf to the vault, whatever. It can vault still extremely fast over pallets and windows. And then, of course, you can go ahead and redirect it and hit someone. Or again, if they're going to vault a pallet or window, you send the dog just in time so that instead of it latching onto them, they just get straight up injured, which works very well when it comes to remember me and save the best for last. I remember when the Houndmaster came out, I don't know if it was changed or nerfed yet, but when the Houndmaster did first come out, if you sent the dog to someone, especially the Obsession, and you already had save the best for last stacks, yes, it would hit the person who was the Obsession. But for whatever reason, say you had remember me and save the best for last, you would get that remember me stack, but you wouldn't lose save the best for last stacks even if someone was injured by the dog. Again, to my knowledge, I don't know if this is removed. I'm going to the assumption that it's not. But for examples like that with certain builds, it works very, very well. Regardless, though, the dog is very well good in chase. They've fixed some of the stuff, so the dog still works maybe sometimes against you in very small scenarios, but for the most part, will pull survivors towards you in your benefit, which is very good. It can also stop in the end game survivors from escaping, which can definitely mean the difference between a win or a loss or a tie. And again, going back to the original point, I just think this killer is very, very good at dealing with survivor with friends. But I don't think she's at the top 5, so that's why she comes in at the top of my A tier. Moving on to my S tier, at the 5th best killer in the game, in my opinion, we have Dracula. Now, Dracula is, like several other killers on this list, like Springtrap, that we've mentioned so far, is one of the best killers at being a jack of all trades, and in this case, he is the master at everything. If you want stealth or a spirit-like ability, where again, you're stealthy sort of, but of course they can see you and they can hear you, whereas with spirit, they don't see you, but they can hear you right in the direction you're coming, and you can't see them. That's the bat. The entire bat is literally Spirit's whole kit, as is Dracula. Of course, you don't get the speed coming out of it, but still, it's that whole main stealth part is in your kit. Plus, you can teleport through the bat. If you want to have Wesker's entire kit in your ability, you change the wolf and you now have 2 jumps. Yes, it doesn't affect or anything, but it can break pallets and whatnot. You also get the little orbs, the scent orbs to find people, maybe if they're stealthing around. You can see those through walls. When you get them, you get a small little bit of speed. And then as well, finally, when you're in the normal Dracula form, which is the form I prefer being in when I'm not running around, I do like the fire the best for an attack. You have a longer range attack that acts sort of similar to Pyramid Head, where it will go through walls or over things, but you have to have a line of sight over something. So if you're looking at a wall, for example, and you know there's a survivor behind it, it will not go through. But if, say, you're on the map, Mother's Dwelling or whatever, and you're going around a boulder that you can see over, the fire will go right over and hit someone. He also has some of the craziest add-ons, which, like Alucard's shield, which is just bonkers on how that works. I mean, that could turn, again, an endgame build, just make it so much better on Dracula specifically. But anyways, this is, again, the definition of killer that can do everything. A really strong range attack. Can break pallets very fast, / find people with the wolf, / has little Wesker bound jumps. The entire Spirit Space kit in his whole build. But all that to be said, well, there aren't major cooldowns. Again, the jumps for the wolves aren't very big for the cooldown. The fires aren't very big for the cooldowns. Again, with survivors, if they know what they're doing and they've played against each individual killer enough, if you play against a ton of Spirit, you can play around Dracula's bat form. If you play against a ton of Pyramid Head, you could play against the Fire and Dracula. If you've played against a ton of Weskers, or even Demogorgons, as it's just one giant jump compared to the two mini ones, you could play against the Wolf form. All that to be said, if you've played a lot of Dead by Daylight, a lot of good survivors, because considering his entire kit is just other powers in his kit, you can play around him relatively well as long as you know what you're doing. And that's kind of be said for all of these top killers. Again, if you know what you're doing, you can play around them. Same with on the other killer side. If you're playing Dracula, you know what you're doing. You know that, okay, they're dodging fire. You got to spice it up. You got to predict with your fire. You got to predict with your jumps. If you know what you're doing, you'll be able to get crazy hits just from random stuff. Again, 360 fires. Those videos are insane. I don't have any footage of that, but those are nuts. That being said, I think all these other killers above are still better than Dracula, because again, there is one other killer, in my opinion, who is a master of everything. You know, jack of all trades, master of everything, very similar to Dracula, but his abilities are a lot more stronger. But for that reason, putting Dracula here. I could see Dracula definitely in, an argument for the fourth spot here really quick, because again, he does have all that stuff in his main kit, but I think people would disagree. But that's where we go into the fourth spot, which is the Blight. The Blight with some of the best map traversability of all time. Of course, the slide tech was removed. It doesn't even matter, though. Being able to just move very fast, hit some crazy hits from going pinpointing off walls and off structures and all this stuff, making pallets and windows arguably just as, more of an annoyance to him, similar to the nurse. They're not in his way. They're not really good against him, if you know what you're doing as Blight, but they are just an annoyance to him. You can play around them super well, being able to bounce and stuff, all the different add-ons, like different things, works very well with you. As someone who doesn't play Blight quite well, I can't give him so much credit. I can't come up with a lot of reasons to put him in this spot that someone else might be able to. It's just the fact that, again, he's extremely fast, extremely hard to play around. And again, as a survivor, if you know what you're doing, taking those those shorter turns as the turn radius, but then again, if the Blight has turn radius, add-ons, you're cooked. There's not a lot you can do. It just depends on how well you can last in a chase against a straight line pinball man that is going to come right for you and down you in like 10 seconds. But entering my top 3 killers, this killer I would have put, if he was not changed from when he first released back in the spring here, he would have been my number 1. I would have put him better than Nurse, but he's been dropped a bit after being nerfed several times. I'm putting down the Ghoul. But that 2 weeks that we had for that Ghoul that could break pallets and still have his power, so literally it was like Nurse goes through pallets, Ghoul, the only counter you have to him, because even if you break line of sight, he'll zoom around faster than the Nurse can, right? And he's always seeing you, right? Instead of just teleporting through a wall where the Nurse can't see you, he just breaks the pallet and zooms over to you, no nothing. But of course, now if you break a pallet, for example, you have the cooldown where you can't use your power, or his power for an range mode once you're done mending. If you do get away, it doesn't last as long. I mean, usually you don't get away, you just get hooked if the Ghoul's after you. But for that reason, all this stuff, I think I'm dropping him down to the 3rd tier. Plus, it takes a little bit more skill. Not a lot. You can still get a very easy first hit, but it takes slightly longer skill, of course, to hit that first hit with the Ghoul. They, again, nerfed his range. They nerfed his jump speed. All that to be said as well, he's countered entirely by MFT. The video should be out soon if it's not out already. But that being said, he's still an insanely strong killer. Very good. It's very weird to see a killer that acts almost, again, similar to Blight, where, yes, he can't curve around like the Blight can when he's going for a hit, but he's just a straight, one-shot, extremely fast, linear killer that just zooms forward, but instead of Blight, who has to, use several different jumps and helps to get that shot, usually they do, the Ghoul 99.959 whatever percent out of 10, 100, whatever, will always get that hit, making you injured. And then, of course, it's just a matter of an M1 mind game that you can do, of course, around the survivor to get that final hit and down them. But again, with all the nerfs being said, I'm unfortunate that I can't put the Ghoul in the first spot. I really wanted to above the Nurse. And again, that first 2 weeks he was out before any nerfs, I would have, but I can't. So he comes in the 3rd spot. And in my 2nd spot, maybe this is bias, but I think I'm going to stick to my guns with this one. I've always said it. I feel like everyone puts this killer so underrated, so wrong in B tier. We have in my 2nd best spot, Vecna. Really quick, I'll mention, Vecna got buffed. Now, did he need to get buffed? But regardless, he did get buffed. And it was a really, really good, very, very big buff. First, there's no 20-second cooldown on his spells. He just starts his spells right away. Some of his spells, like the Fly, are under 20 seconds. Of course, the Hand is slightly longer. All the other spells, like the damage and the Mage Hand are around 30 seconds there, especially with add-ons. Regardless, why am I putting Vecna here when a lot of people would put him lower? A lot of people would put Dracula, who again has very similar stuff, a lot of stuff in his kit. Again, jack of all trades, master of everything. I would say the same for Vecna, but why would people put him lower and I put him higher? Well, we'll start with his 4 main abilities: the Fly, the Hand, the Skeletons, and the Orb, the Sphere. First off, the Sphere. Wall hacks. Wall hacks last longer. You can just find someone on the other side of the map. And the biggest thing that people don't use it for, which you should be using it in Chase, is the fact that the items that survivors are supposed to use against you that gives them a boost, whether it's a speed boost when you use Mage Hand, whether it shows your aura when you're flying, whatever the case is, it disables those items for a certain amount of time as long as that timer is still on, the purple timer when someone gets hit by that. That is the biggest thing, and it is a very good thing that you can use. Yes, you can't use it all the time, but of course it got buffed, so you constantly use it around every 30 seconds or so, again, depending on add-ons. Then you have the Mage Hand, being able to just straight up pick up pallets or block pallets in Chase. This can be very good all over the map. Say God pallet's down and you don't have the time to go ahead and break it because you just downed someone slightly away from it because, they eventually vaulted out of Chase, drop God pallet, whatever. You can go ahead and down that person, pick them up, and then from a distance just pick back up the God pallet and walk away. Yes, someone can then use it, later on, but the fact you just remove that pallet so they have to go ahead and get to it and you can still get a cheeky down or whatever, that's the biggest thing. The Flight. The Flight has, again, a now much faster duration. You move further and you move faster. Of course, the cooldown for it is slightly longer, but for the most part, you're genuinely not going to get a hit after using the Fly anyways, unless you're using it when you're dropping from a high spot, and like say Midwich with the vault windows there. Regardless, for the most part, you're not going to get a hit off of that, but it is amazing map traversability that just got buffed and better, and again, you can get that every between 20 and 25 seconds. But in my opinion, the best spell that he has, and one of the reasons why I think he's one of the best killers, is unlike, again, Dracula with his fire, how you have to have a line of sight or stuff like that. Or Huntress, you have to be able to hit someone with the hitbox. Pyramid Head, you can hit people through walls but to a certain range. The Skeletons have very long range that can be increased with add-ons. It can be lowered onto the floor so that you can specifically, use it for any scenario. Just put it on the floor and it's always going to hit people if you know where it's going to go. But it can hit multiple people at once. Here's the base kit. It hits multiple people at once. It can hit up to like every single person. As there's 5 skeletons, it can hit everybody. That's genuinely never going to happen. But if someone's unhooking, you can go ahead and here's the biggest thing. Spawn the skeletons right on someone. If you do that, they're not expecting it. For the most part, they're not going to pre-crouch. So when you spawn it right on someone, it's a guaranteed hit for you. And that is very strong to be used on someone. The other thing is if you know your elevations, maybe you're playing on a map like RPD, or maybe you're in your basement in Shack, as long as you just even drop into Shack for a split second, you can send the skeleton slightly lower, and that will guarantee a hit on someone. As the skeletons will now, they can't crouch underneath it, so it'll guarantee a hit. The skeletons can be used in so many different ways, from spawning on people to also just straight up blocking off windows or pallets because people aren't going to want to go over there because, of course, they'll have to crouch and slow down or whatever. Or even mid-chase, you just spawn it in so they crouch mid-chase and you can catch up like that. The skeletons are so versatile, and I feel like that is the biggest and best spell that everyone is using incorrectly. Again, this is probably the hottest take. People are going to want him a lot lower, and I understand that. Again, this is also bias coming from someone who plays a lot of Vecna main, after all. But I just find that all of his spells, even though the cooldown is bigger, again, I'm going to compare him to Dracula a lot, because Dracula also has a lot of stuff in his base kit. Again, Dracula can teleport with the bat, but there is a pretty substantial cooldown on that. It is obviously quicker than the flight that Vecna has, but it's a lot more limited than the flight that Vecna has. So there you go. His fire, much better cooldown, but it's nowhere near as strong as the skeletons are. He doesn't have a mage hand to, of course, block anything in chase or just pick stuff back up, and he doesn't get wall hacks at all. That is, again, the biggest thing. Vecna has, at his core, he is very similar, but he is again, jack of all trades, master at everything. Wall hacks, damage, info, blocking everything, map traversability, he has it all, and he's very good at it. Again, I don't think he needed a buff at all. Even before he was my highest kill rate killer, he's also currently one of the highest killers in the game with a very high kill rate. But regardless, he's still a very good killer, and I'm putting him at the second spot. Moving on, I think we all saw this coming. If Vecna's here and the ghoul's slightly below him and whatever, the nurse is like 10 times better again. Fundamentally just breaks the entire game. Goes through walls, goes through floors, goes through pallets, goes through vault windows, and can guarantee a hit. Her only counter is breaking line of sight. And even then, due to 2 blinks, you blink to where someone was around a wall, and then you see him and you blink to catch up with them and you hit him. Very, very few small counterplay. A good nurse is going to win 10 times over. That's why there are, win streaks that are hundreds of wins long because the nurse is that crazy. But there we go. That was my 2025 9.1.0 killer update. Obviously, I'm doing this outro after I recorded everything as I wanted to get all that done before I do the outro. Potentially, I could be wrong with some stuff, especially as I've been playing Clown a little bit more, and I did record that. I still, find where I put all the killers. I think I put them in the right spot. Maybe I could have moved Clown up a bit, and a killer like Howmaster, maybe I could move them down. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you think, but I think my list, for my opinion, for what I've played, my experiences, I think this is a good list for where I would put everyone on a tier list. Again, and obviously there is some bias showing, but in everything, in every killer tier list, it's never going to be exactly what I think everyone agrees on, as there's always going to be bias from everybody else. But yeah, without further ado, hope you guys enjoyed nonetheless. Maybe leave a like, maybe leave a nice comment down below, maybe hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell, and to see y'all again next year for my 2026 killer tier list. Bye, everybody.